All right. Well, it's 7:30, so we'll start this meeting. This is the public meeting for the Southeast District. I'm Jake Warner. I'm the district manager for this region. Thank you all for coming in, especially on such a nice evening like tonight. We will be doing question and answering again. If you have questions, go ahead and type them in the chat. You should be able to see the chat on the top or side of your page. As you get your questions, go ahead and type them in. We'll have some folks working in the background sorting the questions, and we'll go through them at the end of our presentation, try to answer them for everybody. So getting started on this. If you watched the statewide meeting just a little bit ago, Aaron talked about another couple of in-person meetings or get-togethers, you might say, that we'll be having later this year. Myself, or our other biologists in the office will be participating in these. We'll be at either Holmes Lake on June 23rd or Prairie Queen Lake on July 25th or 15th. If people want to come by and ask us, this will be part of our community fishing program that we'll have. We'll be there from about 6 to 8 p.m. So like I said, my name is Jake Warner. Other biologists in our office are Coy Blair, Derek Kane, and Jensen Lepsock. This is our contact information. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, criticisms, feel free to reach out to us at any time. I'll have this slide up again at the end of the presentation so you can copy down our information if you would like to. So the Southeast District covers about 19 counties in Southeast Nebraska. We have about 5% of the surface water in Nebraska, about 65% of the state's population. So most of our water bodies here are characterized as high use. Because of this, we tend to have most of the regulated fisheries. We have 120 water bodies and counting. We have 2 new ones that just came online last year, Forest City and Mad Bear and Gretna. We should have another one opening soon in Elkhorn. These are all man-made reservoirs and sand pits. Because of that, we do have fluctuations in water level. All of our reservoirs are for flood control. So they shouldn't fluctuate as much as other reservoirs like irrigation reservoirs, but they are still dependent on rainwater. And when we're in the drought like we have been for the last 5 years, we're going to have some fluctuations. We're going to have some low water levels as well. So we'll go over some of the water levels that we've seen, that we're currently seeing, but hopefully this will be the last such update and we'll get some rain and fill these water bodies up. So this is a list of low water bodies. Once again, these are all due to drought. We are not actively draining any of these reservoirs. There could be others that we just weren't able to get to and check before the meeting. One of them could be Worth Bros, could be low as well. But these ones that I have highlighted here in yellow are lakes that you might be able to launch a boat into. Like I said, you might be able to. We were able to launch in East Twin and Willard Meyer last fall. We haven't tried to put a boat in since, but we were able to launch in there. If you do try to launch in these, I would advise extreme caution getting in. The low water could be hazardous. Plus all the underwater hazards, they're either gonna be right under the surface or a lot closer to the surface than they used to be. So be cautious if you do want to get into these water bodies. These other ones, they're either dry or critically low to the point where you cannot launch a boat in these. Some you may be able to launch a handcraft or hand launch watercraft into these, but access is going to be pretty limited and likely somewhat difficult. Like I said, a number of these are dry as well. With these critically low water levels or dry water levels, we were still able to get out and do some work, and there were some opportunities. We were able to get in and renovate Olive Creek. Common carp in Olive Creek were becoming more and more prevalent and were impacting the water quality of the reservoir as well as the game fish populations. So we took advantage of these extremely low water levels and chemically renovated the reservoir to remove the common carp from the system. All renovations go through the same basic process. We first identify the watershed, and then we survey the ponds either by talking with the landowners or putting our gear in those ponds and surveying the water bodies ourselves, just to make sure there aren't any nuisance species in these ponds or where they are located throughout the drainage. If a pond does come back with those nuisance species in it, we typically work with the landowner to treat their pond to once again ensure that we get all those nuisance species out of the drainage. Or in the Olive Creek drainage, with the drought that we have, there were only a handful of ponds that did actually have water in them. I think we identified 33 ponds in there, and of them, there were maybe 10 that had water. Working with the landowners there, none of them had any species that we were concerned about getting back into Olive Creek once the renovation was complete. During a typical renovation, we'd also treat the creek systems feeding into these lakes, but once again, with the low water level and the dry conditions, all of our creeks were dry. So our treatment was confined to the main body of the reservoir. These are a couple figures of the bathymetric maps of Olive Creek. The figure on the left is a bathymetric map of Olive Creek when it's at full pool, and it typically has a surface acre of about 175 acres. The week before the renovation, we remapped what was left of the water body, of the water in the reservoir, which is the map on the right, and it was down to a surface area of about 46 acres. Additionally, normal storage of Olive Creek is approximately 1,400 acre feet, and during our treatment, we were down to about 20 acre feet. So critically low water levels at Olive Creek, and gave us an opportunity to treat it. The deepest spot we found when we were doing the bathymetric survey, while it was low, was about 2 feet, maybe a touch more, but the majority of the lake was about a foot or less. So this renovation, we undertook a bit different strategy and treated it through the ice for a couple of different reasons. One, the sediment around the lake is incredibly soft, and launching any boats or putting our equipment on the lake and operating them in the lake would have been extremely difficult. And two, road breaks down at a much slower speed in the colder water, so it would increase our residency time of the chemical in the water to increase our contact time with the fish and get a better kill. Part of that process, as you can see here, was drilling over 300 holes. We were right around 330 holes that we gridded out, drilled, and later came back the next day once the sediment had settled down from the drilling action. And we used backpack sprays to apply chemical into the water under the ice and let it disperse naturally. Here you can see the chemical starting to move out and mix away from the hole. After the ice came off, we were able to get out and document the effects of the under the ice treatment. You can see in these pictures, it was pretty thorough. Most of the fish that we observed were common carp. There were some catfish and a few crappies left in there. But we're pretty confident in the effectiveness of this treatment, and we will be putting nets in again this spring just to make sure that we got them all. Once the reservoir comes back to satisfactory levels, or comes up to the point where we're confident that it can sustain fish, we'll put bluegill, black crappie, channel catfish, saugeye, and largemouth bass back in. Some of the other work we were able to do during the low water and with the limited amount of ice that we had this year is we were able to get some of the brushing projects done in the lakes that were completely dry. We were able to get some in cottontail, killdeer, and merganser this year. With that, we had tried to get a project done on Zarinsky during the ice season, but just due to scheduling conflicts and once again with the ice being here for only a limited amount of time, we weren't able to. We're going to try and do it through the open water season with our new habitat parks that we got this year, and see if we can't get that going and maybe do another project somewhere else, perhaps branched out. But we'll move on, and Derek is going to cover some of the creel survey work that we did here.
Thanks, Jake. For those of you who don't know, I'm Derek Kane. I'm one of our local district biologists. And today I'm here to talk about two projects that we're currently doing, and one of them is our creel surveys. As fisheries managers, we use creel surveys to combine information from angler counts and angler interviews to give us estimates of angler effort, catch, and harvest at water bodies across our district and across the state. Here in the Southeast District, we've done creel work on a lot of our water bodies over the past 15 years or so. A red dot on that map indicates all the different water bodies where we've done some type of creel work. Those water bodies include Flanagan, Conestoga, Duck Creek, among many others. These surveys have primarily been conducted as 7-month studies, April through October, focusing on angler catch, harvest, and effort on the open water period of the year. But this past winter, we wanted to do something a little bit new and unique to us. We know that there's significant effort, catch, and harvest at our lakes during the winter through the ice. But we're a little unsure of the bounds of just how much effort and catch is occurring. So to start taking a look at that and just try to develop some understanding of that in our district, we picked 2 lakes, Red Cedar, just north of Lincoln, and Prairie View in the northwest part of Omaha. And we decided, we didn't quite have the longest ice season this year, has been mentioned. We had about a 16-day window of safe ice at both these lakes. But over that period of time, our staff spent about 12 days, 6 days each at one of these lakes, and conducted interviews and counts to see what was going on. Over at Red Cedar, we conducted 18 counts and 38 interviews, which covered about 49 different anglers who caught about 800 fish. A majority of those were bluegill and crappie. Most of them were released, with about 600 being released and a quarter of them, about 200, being harvested. Over at Prairie View, we conducted 34 counts and 16 interviews covering 27 anglers. We recorded 225 fish caught, a majority of them being bluegill that were released, and a small handful of them that were harvested. As of right now, we're still kind of in the data entry, data analysis portion of the project, so we don't have any big numbers of the effort estimations or the total catch, total harvest estimations for that whole window. But I just wanted to highlight that this was a big project that we took on. It's something that we in this district and statewide as a whole are interested in and planning on spending some time over the next couple of winters to continue doing this sort of work, just to see all and kind of quantify the amount of effort, catch, and harvest that are occurring at our lakes. The next project I wanted to highlight is our ongoing Northern Pike project, where our efforts here are currently focused on Flanagan Lake, located in northwest Omaha near 168th and Fort. We started stocking Northern Pike in Flanagan in 2018 to offer really a unique fishing opportunity that is unmatched in the Omaha metro area. We started with about 9,000 2.5-inch fish stocked in 2018. And then from 2019 and every third year forward, we stocked about 1,000 fish of the 12 to 14-inch variety. We do this stockings just because we don't see a whole lot of natural recruitment from Northern Pike at the lake. And so this stocking helps really build what's become a pretty cool fishery. If you look at the fish we sampled last March, you see that we sampled a couple hundred fish. And you see that it's a pretty good size structure. We have a lot of fish kind of focused in that 25 to 30-inch range, which is a really good group of catchable fish available to anglers. Then we also have a big hump of 30 to 35 and even up to 40-inch fish that really provide that trophy potential for anglers to catch. We did this sampling in March. It's right around the spawn of these fish, and they seem to be a little bit more susceptible to our catch. And so when we did this sampling, we missed this circle right here of all the fish that we ended up stocking later this summer. So when we go back out next week, we're going to do this effort again. We're hopefully going to catch a lot more fish in this 14 to 16-inch range. And we're also hoping to see these 2 peaks of fish densities shift a little bit further to the right and be a little bit larger individuals. As I kind of mentioned, this is a big effort. We go out and over the course of a week set about 120 nets. And so we are always open to taking volunteers out with us. So if you have any interest, we're covered for this year. We've got a full group of folks coming out to help us. But at the end, as Jake mentioned, our contact information will be there. Shoot me an email, give me a phone call, and I'll make sure we get you onto our contact list for future efforts when we're seeking help from volunteers.
All right, I'll take this over from Derek. My name's Coy Blair. I'm also a district biologist here in the Southeast. Today, I'm going to be talking about some of our new regulations in the district. First, we're going to talk about Flanagan maximum length limit. This was a new regulation in 2023. So a maximum length limit of 10 inches on crappie and then 8 inches on bluegill and red ear. And the idea behind this regulation is to focus our harvest on some of our smaller panfish to increase growth rates and protect our trophy fish. And so far, at least, we've been successful in protecting some of those bigger fish. We see 15-inch crappie either through our samples or angler reports pretty much every year. So looking at the effect of this regulation so far, here we have our trap net catch per unit effort for bluegill on the left and then crappie on the right. And each one of these colors denotes the different length categories. And I'll go ahead and highlight our samples for 2025. For bluegill, we had about 25 fish per trap net, and for crappie, we had about 5. At least for bluegill, this isn't too far off of what we've seen in the past. But curly leaf pondweed has become very dense at Flanagan, and that can really affect our trap nets in the spring. And as far as crappie go, we've never really gotten a great sample at Flanagan. There's a lot of offshore habitat, a lot of trees in deep water that those fish can move into. But both of these species are in higher abundance than these our sampling has shown. We see a lot of them during our pike sampling early in the spring. But overall, we've seen pretty similar growth for both species as compared to other areas in the metro. But we'll continue this evaluation here in the next few years to see if our regulation has some effect on these populations. So next I'll talk about our largemouth bass project. So we had a new slot limit regulation in 2025 on Prairie Queen, Prairie View, Duck Creek, and Wagon Train. So this is a protected slot limit of 15 to 18 inches. So you can keep 5 fish under 15 inches and then 1 over 18. And Wagon Train, since the water levels have been so low, I won't mention it much today, but the idea behind this regulation is to reduce our largemouth bass densities to, again, improve our growth rates. So to evaluate this regulation, we enlisted the help of a couple master's students from UNL. One is going to be looking at tagging bass, and the other is going to be looking at a creel. So Mike here on the left is going to be looking at the tagging project, and then Logan on the right will be doing creel. So looking a little bit about at Mike's project, this tagging will give us an idea of some of our population characteristics at these 3 lakes, abundance, growth, and mortality. And so far, he's been able to tag about 4,800 largemouth bass and plans on tagging some more fish in the spring. And one thing I wanted to mention is that, this project requires some angler assistance. So if you ever catch a tag bass at Prairie Queen, Prairie View, or Duck Creek, make sure you find one of these collection boxes. They're located near the boat ramps and near angler access sites. So just give a little bit of information that'll help Mike out a lot. And then looking at our creel project, the idea behind this is to determine our angler preference and attitude towards the new regulation. And so far, Logan has found that most people have been pretty positive to the new regulation. And over half of our anglers were aware of the new regs in the first year, which is pretty good. One interesting thing that we've seen from Logan's creel data is that catch and release is still pretty dominant. Using some extrapolated creel data, we've seen harvest of about 110, 112 bass combined in our 3 lakes. And that extrapolated creel data showed that over 32,000 largemouth bass were caught. So, our harvest is still really, really low. So have we seen any impact on the sampling? So again, here I have our catch per unit effort of Duck Creek, top left, Prairie Queen on the top right, Prairie View on the bottom. And this is catch per unit effort of largemouth bass per hour of electrofishing. And these are for the last 10 years for each of these lakes. And I have the latest sample in 2025 highlighted here. And, you could say this is kind of a decline compared to our sampling history, but we gathered this data from Mike in his tagging project. So he was putting a lot more effort out than we normally do in our standardized data. And as I mentioned, harvest has been pretty much negligible to this point. So we don't expect that the regulation has really had too much of effect on our bass populations yet. But you can see that, especially at Duck Creek and Prairie View, historically, they've been super high abundance with relatively poor size structure. So hopefully we'll see some changes in those populations to maybe, favor some of those larger fish and improve our growth rates there. So I'll go ahead and give it over to Jensen to talk about catfish.
Thank you, Coy. So yeah, I'll start off with talking about some of our catfish projects here in Southeast. Just a brief introduction. My name's Jensen. I'm a biologist here in Southeast along with these other guys. So let's look at our numbers of our stockings throughout the years. So this is our blue catfish stockings in Southeast. And I have these divided up into two size categories, the blue being our smaller fish, the 4 to 7 inches, and then the red color are fish that are a little bit larger, 9.8 to 11 and a quarter inches. Of note, our initial stocking at Pawnee was fairly successful. And so we wanted to try that again here at Zorinsky. So if we look at our stocking at Pawnee, the initial one here, you can see we've had pretty good growth and we've been able to track that cohort over time. And even to this day, the fish from this year class are about 30 inches. So that's really neat to see. We're getting good growth and return on that. And we're starting to see success from these other stockings as well. So starting in 2022, we started stocking these water bodies every year. You can see that Branched Oak being the largest water body, we stock it with the most fish, followed by Pawnee and then Zorinsky. Branched Oak and Pawnee, we're starting to see some of these little guys show up now. But at Zorinsky, we've been struggling to sample these. So you can see here that we had some bigger fish. I believe they're about 11 and a quarter inches that we were able to stock into that lake this past year. So what does that look like for our individual lakes now? So this is a length frequency graph of our blue catfish at Pawnee. And you can see that we have a good population from that initial stocking that's moving through the system. 800 millimeters is around 30 inches for those that are curious. But we're starting to see some smaller fish show up, and that's in these 200 to 300 millimeter range. And we're hoping that the stockings in the future, we're going to add to this population as they get older. So keep in mind the blue cats at Pawnee are a one fish bag. So keep that in mind. And then the flatheads at Pawnee. So this is a really robust population. Its initial stocking was in the 60s. It hasn't been stocked since then. So it's a self-sustaining population. They're decent size out there. There's some fish that are even around the 40-inch mark out there. But this has been self-sustaining and it's been pretty good fishery out there as well. And that takes us to Branched Oak with the blue cats here. We're also seeing a similar trend here as well as with Pawnee. We have those initial stockings that did really well, and we have some larger individuals present at Branched Oak, but we're also seeing that the most recent stockings here starting to contribute to the population. So hoping the next couple of stockings keep that trend moving forward. Again, this is a one fish bag here. And then flatheads, I would say this is probably our premier flathead fishery in the Southeast. We have some really large individuals. If you want your chance at a trophy flathead, Branched Oak is a great spot. The initial stocking here was in 99 and 2000, and it's been self-sustaining since then. It's a great opportunity. Go out and catch yourself some flathead, and keep in mind they're catch and release here at Branched Oak. And with that, I will lead into the fisheries forecast. So I just kind of want to remind everybody how to find this on our website. So this is our picture of our homepage. If you go to our homepage and up at the top, there's a section for guides and maps. If you click on that, there should be another option for fishing guides and reports. Click on that and you'll have to scroll down just a little bit to hit the fishing forecast. And once you click on that, you'll find our fishing forecast for the current year. So this is a document we put out every year. I encourage everybody to go look at all our sampling data. This is all the hard work we do throughout the year gets included on this, and it's not only for Southeast, it's for the whole state. So definitely go check it out. There's a lot of good information there. You can check out lakes before you go there, see what the size of fish are, how many there are. It's a really, really good tool for you guys to check out. Alongside that, we have some more pared down reports that we write that have a little bit more detail than the fishing forecast. These should be available for all our districts, and Southeast will have some updated ones coming out in the next month or so for this current year. So it's also on that same page. Just scroll down past the fishing forecast and you can access those reports there. Again, super useful information there. Go check that out. I encourage you guys to explore our webpage. And that takes us to our top picks. So this is, we sat down as a round table and kind of discussed our, what we would think are the best fishing spots are in Southeast Nebraska here for the coming year. So for walleye and saugeye, Cunningham has been fishing really well. I think that's going to continue into this year. There's a good number of keepers out there. Checkland also sampled really well if you want to try and get on some walleye there. Largemouth bass, we have a bunch of opportunities available in the Southeast District here. Flanagan has a great population, and so does Walnut Creek. And then I want to highlight two rivers in Louisville. These are some great opportunities here that have more than one lake at those areas that fish really well. So if you want to get on some largemouth, those are some great areas to check out. And then crappie, at Wanahoo, they're actually doing really well. We got a little help from the flood where it washed some of the smaller individuals out and kind of thinned out our numbers. We have a good population of a 12-inch crappie out there. And if you can find them, I think it's going to be a really good fishing lake this coming year. Along with Iron Horse, we didn't sample that one the greatest this last year, but there are some bigger individuals there. Bluegill, we have Walnut Creek. It's going to be a good fishing spot this year. Wildwood is consistent, and there's some bigger individuals at Duck Creek. And then we have channel cats, Branched Oak, and Pawnee. I touched on our other catfish populations out there earlier in the presentation, but this is a good spot for channel cats as well. Stagecoach is going to be a good spot if you want to try and get a master angler catfish this year. I think that's going to fish really well. Yellow perch and smallmouth bass, Big Elk and Two Rivers are great spots for that. And then red ear, we have Duck Creek, Prairie Queen, and Walnut Creek. And with that, I can toss it back to Jake and maybe take some questions here.
All right, thanks, guys. With that, we can start answering questions. I think Jordan will be emceeing for us tonight, relaying questions to us from the chat. So if you guys have questions, feel free to put them in and we'll get to them.
Thank you, everybody. Yeah, we got a few questions coming in, but keep them rolling. Start out with this first one. I'll send it to you, Jake. In terms of stocking strategy, would you ever consider stocking white crappie over black crappie? Maybe specifically to Olive Creek, but just in general in the Southeast.
Yeah. Typically, when we first renovate a reservoir and it fills back in, or when we first construct a reservoir, those water conditions tend to favor the black crappie a bit more. You have really good water quality. Once you get the crop out, or not the crappie, once you get the carp out, that helps bring the aquatic vegetation back, and there's more macrophytes, more bugs, things that just really benefit those black crappie, especially in those smaller compoundments. With that, we are going to be stocking white crappie into Wanahoo this year. With the degraded water quality there and the presence of shad, that type of environment more favors the white crappie. They tend to get bigger, or longer anyways. They tend to be a little more piscivorous or more geared towards eating other fish than black crappie do. So we're hoping if we can get some white crappie in there while the black crappie population is reduced a bit, we can boost the white crappie population in there. Hopefully overall increase the size structure of the fish in there while also providing another species to be able to target in our district more readily anyways. Their white crappie exists in a couple of places, but they aren't nearly as prevalent as some of our bigger western reservoirs.
Thank you. Jensen, I'm going to bring you back on for this one. I know you've spent some time down at Rockford. Any plans to supplement the blue cat population down there?
As of right now, I don't think we have any plans to supplement that population down there. The problem with Rockford is those fish, we aged them this year. Well, we kept some individuals, and they're actually a lot older than what they appear. So there's not very good growth there, and there's a lot of little tiny fish there. So I don't think we have any plans right now to supplement that population going forward.
Yeah, just to add on and elaborate a little bit on what Jensen said, we've sampled it a few times, and most of the fish that we've sampled there are 10 to 12-inch fish. And when we age them, those 10 to 12-inch fish are 4 years old. Just that's an example of the poor growth you see there. You see a few adults that are 4 to 5 pounds, but not very many.
Sure. Thank you, guys. Jensen, bring you back on for this one too. In terms of the fishing forecast, what about wipers in Zorinsky and Wanahoo?
At Wanahoo, we actually have a decent population there. I know people have had trouble finding them, getting on them in the summertime. I know I've heard reports of people fishing between the bridge out there on the breakwaters and having pretty good luck, but I think those fish are going to be 15 inches plus this year out there. So if you can find them, it might be a good spot. And then at Zorinsky, they're going to be a little bit bigger. Again, kind of squirrely. So if you can find them, it's a decent spot to try and get on them there as well.
All right. I'm going to bring on our assistant division administrator for management, Aaron Blank, to answer this one. It has to deal with a little bit of what Jake talked about with the Olive Creek renovation and talking about the availability of liquid rotenone. Is that available for purchase again?
Yeah, it is. We got word here earlier, a month or so ago. The issue that we're going to be working through is it's about doubled in price right now, and it's probably some supply and demand with it being offline for a while. And so we're in the process, just as an administration, evaluating, what we want to do and the need for us to do more renovations at this time. We can still use powder on a lot of the projects that we can. Powder's a cheaper alternative. It just both of them have their advantages and disadvantages. And so we're evaluating it, and there's some other issues with the liquid on the quantity that you can get right now. And so as it goes on, we'll continue to evaluate it.
Thank you. I'll bring on Coy and Jake to comment on this one, having to do with length limits on, as you mentioned, Coy, with the crappie and the bluegill, the max, and just kind of reiterate your guys' thoughts on how that's working, and also how you mentioned how it's working on bass and possible utilization of those regulations elsewhere.
Yeah, I could talk about that a little bit. So yeah, like I said, the maximum length limit at Flanagan so far, there hasn't been a huge impact on growth necessarily, but it's still pretty early on. That was just implemented in 2023. But the big thing we've seen is holding on to some of those larger fish, those 15-inch master angler size fish, and the idea of the 21-inch minimum length limit for the bass. It's kind of a different philosophy, that the idea behind that is to kind of keep down our panfish populations, reduce the densities of those, kind of keep a top-down control on the panfish, just to better their sizes and better their growth rates overall. So that it kind of does act as a maximum length limit in itself, just because there aren't a ton of 21-inch fish, at least in our district.
Thank you. Jake, we had a question. A lot of the figures we're using metric sizes. Can you just let everybody know why we use metric instead
Yeah,
of the English uh,
yeah. It,
units?
you guys aren't alone in having to convert between millimeters and inches somewhat often. I still have to do it, but metric is the standard for scientific tools, and it's what we use as fisheries biologists throughout the state is metric. So we try to translate it when we can. The tools used to make these figures, their default set is in metric. We're working on being able to convert between metric and U.S. standard when we can. So hopefully in the future, we'll all of our figures that we present will have U.S. standard for you guys.
All right. Thank you. Um, Switching gears to yellow perch, Jensen and or Jake, they were stocked in Walnut Creek a few years ago. Any update on how they're doing there?
Jake, do you
Yeah.
have those? Okay.
Yeah. So we experimentally stocked yellow perch for 2 years at Walnut Creek in Chetwynd, and the idea was is we've seen some natural recruitment at a couple other of our lakes that do have infestations of curly pondweed, like wildwood and birchard. There's not a lot of perch in there, but there is some, and they are self-sustaining. So we wanted to try and see if we stock these fish into these lakes, if they would recruit on their own. So the plan was always to do 2 years of stocking at both lakes, and if they take and naturally recruit, great. If they don't, then we're not going to continue with the stockings there. So far, since we stocked them, I believe we've seen one yellow perch come out of wildwood, so it doesn't appear that they took. But it was an interesting thought. We thought it was worth at least attempting to see if we can't get yellow perch in more of our water bodies.
Thank you. Before I lose it here on the list, I'm going to bring in our boating access coordinator, Zach Horseman, and Jake. You can also comment on this if you have any thoughts. It has to do with the dock situation at Prairie Queen and the possibility of getting either more or longer docks there. Any comments on that?
Yeah, it's something we can definitely evaluate. We've heard kind of the same complaint out at Flanagan, just not being quite long enough on the rail system out there. It's something we take into consideration on future builds. And we've talked a little bit about it in the past, just as an office. So we can look into that in the future.
All right. Jake, out at Wagon Train, you guys mentioned how the water levels have been low since we did the project there. Is there any plans to go out there and try to mow the overgrowth before potential water levels fill up, or just leave it as is until it fills up?
Yeah. We started work there this winter clearing trees that are choking out some of the bank fishing access sites there, partnering with our parks division as well. We cleared most of the breakwaters that are on the north end of the reservoir where the sediment retention dam is. There's a lot of trees on that. We spent a few days down there clearing them off and piling them up to be taken off. I know Parks did quite a bit of work in the on the east side of the lake, where mostly around the boat ramp and in that bay, clearing the trees out of there, opening up those fishing accesses. And next on the docket, we'll be clearing the west access there, the main parking lot, the campground. There's a lot of trees that have grown up there, making bank fishing pretty difficult. So we are going to address that. We're going to make sure and get those taken down here quickly, hopefully before the water comes up.
Jake, another question for you dealing with the pike at Flanagan. If you guys start to see that population decline, would you consider stocking walleye fingerlings in there, or advanced fingerlings?
Yeah, that's definitely a possibility. We don't have those kind of plans yet. We'll we'll see how the pike fishery goes, and then once we do see a decline, we'll evaluate the fishery, see how it's at, see what the status is before we pull the trigger on putting walleye in there. But as the time being, the pike fishery is doing pretty darn well. So hopefully it continues to do well and we get some good longevity out of that fishery.
All right. I got some questions about vegetation and water quality. First, are there any plans for chemical control of curly-leaf at Checkland? And also, is this more of a cyclical issue with water quality in the lakes and vegetation, or is it any thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I'll address that Checkland first. That for the most part is curly pondweed that chokes out, especially around May, June. Curly leaf starts growing under the ice early in the year in January, February, and it's at its worst come the time when the weather's getting nice and fishing is usually the best, causing a lot of conflicts. Recently, we were able to get some funding to purchase some herbicide called Sonar that is known to be pretty good at treating the curly leaf. And we tried it at a few of our lakes, not just in the district, but around the state last year with some pretty good effects. We treated Prairie View with it last year. We were a little late in the year getting the chemical, so it went on a little later. But it seemed to really kill that stuff back and open up water. And they were able to treat Prairie View last week, and I think Checkland last week as well with the same stuff. So hopefully we'll be addressing that issue at those two water bodies. It is kind of an experiment. We'll be doing 3 years in a row of treatments out there to try to get the curly leaf under control. It is a broad spectrum herbicide, so it hits a lot of the plant life in there. So we don't want to have it too district wide in case there's any negative effects that we see. But it's experimental. We're monitoring it and we're going to see how it works. But with that, you get the curly leaf coming up early in the year that can choke it out. And then once the curly leaf starts to die back, you release a lot of the nutrients in the lake, a lot of the nutrients that were being bound up by that curly leaf or by some of the other vegetation that starts to die back later in the year. And those nutrients will be used by something, and usually it's used by the algae that's in the lake, and that's what turns our lakes green. So it's more of the natural cycle of being in a landscape where we have a lot of nutrients in our lake, being hyper-eutrophic, where we'll see that plant growth and then we'll see it turn into those big algal blooms as well.
All right, couple of follow-up ones here. I missed this one. Is wildwood potentially on the list for treatment? And is that herbicide harmful to the fish at all?
No, the herbicide is not harmful to the fish at all. Potentially, it depends on funding for the chemical, and it depends on how these other lakes respond to it. But any of our lakes that have curly leaf in it could be potential for that, which is going to be more and more of them every year, which is why we're looking into other methods of treating them and trying to get that curly leaf back. We have some spot treatment stuff. It's just a diquat based herbicide that we've used in the past. And we try to get out in May and spray some of our heavy curly leaf lakes that do tend to get quite a bit of pressure that time of year. It's hard just because we have so many lakes that we got to treat, and we can only be so many places at once. And that's a really busy time of the year for us with our spring sampling as well. But we're trying to treat lakes. We're trying to open up those accesses for you guys as well, and we'll see how the sonar pans out, and it may be a tool that we're able to use more in the future.
All right. Do you have any updates on Portal Lake and the water levels there and the issues the NRD has had with the dam?
Yeah. So for the most part with that, from what we've heard from the NRD, is they're still waiting on a normal water year to fully assess what is going on with the lake. We know it's losing water at a fairly fast rate, but we've also haven't gone through a normal year of water. We've had high water events that have filled the lake and then subsequently dropped. And it could just be waiting to build what's called the water mound underneath it. So it's essentially saturating all the ground that's underneath the lake first in order to be able to hold water in the basin. It could just be it's taking a longer time in the middle of a drought to fill that water mound. And I know it seems weird with it being right next to Big Elk that Portal's low while Big Elk isn't, but Big Elk has a much more active drainage. It has springs in it that keep it full. During construction, they had a lot of issues with the water in the basin causing trouble when trying to build that lake, whereas they didn't have those issues in Portal. So those differences in the amount of water in there have been there historically, but we have had other reservoirs in the district like Homestead that had the same issue as Portal did, and it just took a series of years of finally having some good rain to fill that water mound and fill the reservoir up. But I know the NRD is looking into it. They were looking at getting some piezometers to place throughout the basin to monitor where that water is going, so we can get a better idea of the water movement in the ground and address any issues that are coming up.
Thanks. I'll give you a minute here to catch your breath, Jake. I'll ask Jensen about blue cats at Zorinsky. Any possible natural recruitment or just based on stocking there, and just how is the population at Zorinsky?
Yeah, that's just from our stockings, the fish that are out there, and we've only sampled a handful of them from the stocking, so we're not getting any natural recruitment yet. But the hope is with our bigger size stockings that population starts to bolster a little bit. But we don't see a whole lot of natural recruitment in our blue cat populations across the state, so that's why we're stocking those few fisheries we were talking about earlier, Branched Oak, Pawnee, and Zorinsky, the last couple of years more consistently.
All right. And also, Jensen, can you comment on the panfish sizes at Stagecoach and Standing Bear?
Yeah, at Standing Bear, that's a newly renovated water body, so the fish are going to be a little bit smaller. This coming year, there might be some fish that are catchable in the like 6-inch range, something like that. There might be a few adults that we've moved in that you can get in on as well. Stagecoach, they're pretty good. There's a good population of 7 to 8-inch fish out there. And I know a lot of people have had success this last year and through the ice out there as well. So good spots. Have a little patience with Standing Bear as it comes online here. I think in the next couple of years, it's going to be really good.
Thank you. I'll open this up to all you over there. Can you speak on the new lakes in Elkhorn and Gretna? I know you mentioned them. I won't get the names right, so I won't try. But can you just give a little more detail on each of those three, when they're open, the species stocked, any special regulations, anything else our anglers should know about them?
Coy, do you want to take that one on?
Yeah, I can take that one. So we've got Forest City and Mad Bear. Those ones are online now. Both of those have a 21-inch minimum length limit on largemouth bass. But Forest City has been stocked. We stocked it with bluegill and bass this past fall. Mad Bear is not quite full yet, so we haven't stocked that one yet. But Forest City we've seen a ton of forage fish in there. So hopefully the fish in that one are going to be growing here soon. But you should be able to catch a fish, especially at Forest City if you go out there.
Thank you. Derek, I'm going to bring you in on this one, having to deal with kind of crappie harvest over the last several years, especially kind of during the pandemic. Any trends that you saw during your time with the Creel project, if that increased during that time, and now as a biologist out there at the Southeast District, how that's kind of leveled off, or what trends you've been seeing?
Yeah, during the early 2020s with COVID pandemic and everything, we definitely saw a peak in angler effort. most of our catch and harvest-based metrics are directly tied with how much effort's occurring. So when we see those increases in effort, we definitely expect to see a more catch and potentially more harvest. But in general, with crappie, they're such cyclical spawners that every few years there'll be a really big age class. And it'll take 2-3 years, as kind of Jake touched on earlier, for those fish to grow into that 7, 8, 9, 10-inch range. And then if we see harvest of those individuals, we have the potential for those fish to really push through into the 10, 11, 12 inch sized fish. So Wanahu's a great example of, it probably wasn't any angler harvest happening, but we happen to have a flood of 100 years that washed out a ton of the biomass of crappie and opened up some available nutrients and food sources for the remaining crappie in the lake to grow. So it's just one of those things that angler harvest definitely plays a role. We definitely saw probably some elevated harvest over the last couple of years, definitely elevated effort. But yeah, it just happened to be pretty good timing of, we had a good age class of crappies about 2-3 years ago, and now we're seeing them grow into the fish that I think just about all of us here love to go out and catch.
Thanks. Jake, are there any plans for aquatic habitat project down at Rockford?
There aren't any plans yet, but it's one that is on our short list of lakes that we have an eye on to potentially do in the future. So that has a lot of potential to it, I think, to make a great fishery. So possibly.
With the weather like it was the last couple of days, are you guys a little nervous about missing the pike spawn?
Derek?
Yeah, it's one of those that only time will tell. We'll be out there next week and see. We've been doing this for quite a few years, and that middle week of March always seems to be the time, kind of regardless of weather, water temps. The one thing we have maybe in our favor is it's going to get cold again this weekend, and then have some steady warming across the week next week. So we'll cross our fingers that that cold and rewarming will push the fish up shallow and into our nets.
Sure. Dealing with blue cats out of Branch Stoke, do we have any thoughts on how many of those larger blue cats are being harvested, and any thoughts on making it catch and release similar to what the flathead regulation is out there?
So I would say our regs on that are pretty strict. We only have a one fish daily limit, and those bigger catfish, I would say the anglers targeting big blues aren't very harvest oriented. So I don't think unless Jake's familiar with a creel or something that's assessed any harvest on those bigger blue cats. I don't think we've had anything that's assessed the harvest on them. But my initial thought would be that not very many of the big guys are leaving the reservoir, just based on angler aptitude to harvesting big catfish like that. With that being said, it's a good lake right now. If you want to catch a trophy blue cat, there are some bigger individuals out there, and it would be a good opportunity to go out and target them.
I'll add on to that, Jensen. We did some creel work in that area back in the 2015 to 2018. So it's been a few years, but we did see some limited harvest of blues. But again, with the regulation being one, it was definitely limited. And like you mentioned, I actually spent quite a bit of time out there doing some of those surveys. And your tournament anglers or your anglers who are targeting and even taking a step further are successful at catching those big blues are your anglers who are excited to see them in the lake and want them to stay in the lake. So we definitely see a lot more catch and release of that species and of that size than we do others. The one thing that I think is probably good to mention is, especially when they're smaller, there is at times a lot of confusion with channel cats and with blue catfish. So just if you're fishing any of those lakes that have the blue catfish and are determined to harvest some fish, read up on identification and do your best to properly identify those fish that you're taking out.
Jake, can you talk a little bit about how we partner with other entities, either whether it be an NRD or a city, on some of the vegetation clearing and opening up access areas from vegetation for our anglers on waters of all sizes.
Yeah, for sure. We manage the fisheries in all the lakes in the Southeast District, all the public lakes, but a lot of time the facilities isn't controlled by us. It depends on where you're at. A lot of the lakes in the Omaha Metro will either the facilities will be under the control of either the city of Omaha, city of Papillion. Some of them are wildlife management areas, so those are ones that our wildlife partners help clear. Some of them are NRD lakes. The NRDs are the ones that keep them clear. They help spot treatment, spraying vegetation on the breakwaters, spraying woody materials on the breakwaters as well. And there are a few lakes that we go around and we periodically clear the breakwaters best we can. We're going to try and be a little more on top of it this year and get out early and try to make sure that the ones that we control are getting on top of. If you're in the city of Omaha or city of Papillion and you're having trouble with some of them, I'd recommend getting hold of parks or let us know and we can get a hold of parks and work with them on getting some of those cleared or improving access where we can.
Yep, absolutely. What's the outlook on bass at Wearspan looking like?
I could
Derek, you
talk
want
about
to
that, Jake.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, one of
Derek
you.
too. He can
Both
chime
can
in
jump
too if he
in.
wants. So we've seen a kind of a decline in our sampling abundance in the last few samples, but we've seen an improving size structure. So some of those older fish have been reaching larger and larger sizes, and we haven't seen kind of the recruitment that we had seen in the past. And this year we kind of missed a few of those larger fish in our sample. You can see that on the statewide fishing forecast. And I think Jensen was the one out during that day, and it was a beautiful day, and you would think it would be great sampling conditions, but for whatever reason we just missed them that day. And sometimes that happens. So we'll kind of continue to monitor the bass population there. But it kind of seems like at least it's kind of moving towards more of a lower density, but better size structure population.
And just to add on to that, it has functioned a lot of that where it has some lower catch rates to it, but the size structure seems to be improved, which is kind of the target we're moving towards at Prairie Queen, Prairie View, Duck Creek, and Wagon Train as well. It wasn't that long ago, a couple of years ago, that Wearspan was pretty low. It was 4 or 5 feet low. That could have had some impact on the lower catch rates of bass. Could have had some issues with recruitment, leaving a lot of that more optimal recruiting habitat high and dry. But like Coy said, we're monitoring it, and sometimes in our fishing forecast data, there's aspects of it that don't get translated into those catch rates as well. Like Coy said, the weather and the conditions that you're out can dictate a lot of what you're going to see. Some of our lakes, if we sample them, they're on the schedule and we get a rain in the drainage and decreases the water quality to where you have 2 inches of visibility. We're only going to see the fish that come to the surface, and there's a large percentage that don't do that. So there are other factors in our catch rates that just don't translate into that we know. But we're going to keep looking at these and monitor them and make sure we're making science-backed decisions on them as well.
Thank you. This next one, I'm going to bring in Aaron Blank again. Question about real-time weekly fishing reports and collaboration with Nebraska Tourism. Any talk or ideas about possibly doing that in the future?
Yeah, I was reading through that question here. We've had some different iterations of this over the years. We used to have a page right on our website that would produce fishing reports, and the hardest thing was trying to keep up-to-date reports on that, and we struggled with that. From a fishery standpoint, those busy times of the year, May, June, October, our fishery staff are really busy running sampling report or running samples and collecting fish. And we've relied on law enforcement, and some of those issues have come up where they're doing multiple things across there too. And so we never did have a great handle on what a current fishing report was. And so they ended up being fairly vague. And I'm afraid that's what it would tend to be again. And so, you know, what we've really pivoted to and it's a lot of information that's on there for our public and for anglers to consume is our statewide fishing reports. You know, we put out our fishing forecast that should be able to at least provide some areas where anglers are going to know, you know, some areas that, hey, there's quite a few walleyes here. There's enough over 15. And, you know, within that, we also put up our fish sampling reports for lake specific or region specific that are up on our website. Those provide a little bit more detail in that. But really the biggest thing is if you're planning a fishing trip or you got questions or, you know, maybe you just want to call and ask how the bite's been at a certain lake, call our district office, call our biologist. They're more than willing to give you the information that they have to make your trip as good as it can be. But, you know, a lot of it's day to day. And just because, you know, a fishing report's good doesn't mean you're going to go out there and catch them, and vice versa. Just because the report would be bad doesn't mean that it's going to be the day that you go out there and catch a bunch. And so right now, nothing really on the books for being able to provide something like this. I never say never. If we have a good way to collect that information and find one, we would gladly entertain it. It's a difficult thing to get that, especially where we don't have that South, you know, I mentioned South Dakota. That's a huge focus up there especially in the Northeast and along the main stem rivers. So a lot more eyes, a lot more anglers than what we get at our water bodies.
Thanks, Aaron. I know we're past time, but we got just one last question here, and it calls out a specific fish that one of you is holding up, and I don't want to make anybody else's fish they are holding up seem inadequate. So I will give you all a chance to lie to your anglers that have joined us tonight. You can each tell where you captured the fish, how big it is, and any other information you want to lie to your anglers about.
I'll go first. The crappie that I'm holding was 17.5 inches and it was caught out of Flanagan.
I can go next. That wiper was caught in a different state. And honestly, I don't remember how long this is, probably 25 inches or so, maybe.
I've got a pair of 2.5, 3 pound largemouth that were caught at a reservoir not in this district. Listen to the Northeast and hear about Summit if you want to see and hear about where these ones were caught.
I don't remember how big mine was, but I believe it was at Calamus. So tune in later this week.
All right. Thanks, guys. It was perfect timing as the sirens started wailing outside my office. So good timing to end it. Thank you all.
Thanks everybody for tuning in. Really appreciate you. And once again, feel free to contact us at these numbers below anytime.